The moment the camera stopped rolling at Buckingham Palace, something far darker than a royal divorce was already unfolding behind closed doors. What looked like a calm announcement was actually the public mask for a storm that had been building for years. And when the truth finally surfaced, it wasn't just a marriage that shattered, it was an entire royal narrative collapsing in real time. Because according to insiders, the custody agreement that was quietly signed in February 2026 didn't just separate Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. It detonated a chain reaction that exposed hidden contracts, secret legal clauses, and a battle for control so ruthless that even hardened royal advisors were stunned by what they discovered. And at the center of the explosion was one shocking accusation that Harry himself would eventually whisper to those closest to him, an accusation that Meghan had done something almost unthinkable. It all began on a cold February morning when Prince William stepped in front of the cameras at Buckingham Palace with Princess Anne standing beside him. His statement was brief, controlled, and eerily calm. The custody agreement between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had been finalized, he said, and the consequences would be permanent. No questions, no explanations, just a door closing behind him as he walked back into the palace. But what the public didn't know yet was that the document he was referring to was nearly 100 pages long and had been drafted in secret by a coalition of royal lawyers, constitutional advisors, and Privy Council representatives. And the contents of that document would shock everyone, because this wasn't simply a divorce settlement, it was a royal containment operation. The monarchy had decided something was very wrong, and they were preparing to act. Behind the palace walls, the tension had already reached boiling point weeks earlier. It started when Princess Anne arrived at Windsor Castle carrying a file so explosive that it forced an emergency meeting with King Charles and Prince William. The file was labeled with a phrase that sent a chill through the room: immediate custodial breach. Inside were pages of documentation tracking Meghan's actions over several months. According to the file, Archie and Lilibet had suddenly been withdrawn from their California schools without informing royal child welfare officers who had oversight responsibilities. Medical appointments arranged through official royal channels had been canceled. Communication with welfare officers had been abruptly cut off. And perhaps most alarming of all, a $6.3 million education trust established by the Crown for the children had been dissolved without clear explanation. Princess Anne didn't describe it as negligence. She called it a structured pattern of disengagement. Those three words changed everything, because in legal language, that phrase implied intent. By the next day, the monarchy activated something almost no one outside the royal system even knew existed: the Royal Emergency Guardianship Protocol, a constitutional mechanism designed for one purpose: protecting royal heirs if their welfare was believed to be compromised. The last time it had been invoked was decades ago during succession instability in the post-war era, and now it was being activated again. Except this time, the target wasn't an external threat. It was inside the royal family itself. Prince William escalated the situation even further by invoking a rarely used clause that allowed the Crown to assume custodial control over royal minors if their identity or future role within the monarchy was believed to be under threat. Within days, the machinery of the institution was moving with terrifying speed. Lawyers began drafting the most aggressive royal legal document in modern history, and when it was finally signed on February 15th, the consequences were staggering. The Crown was granted permanent legal guardianship over Archie and Lilibet, not temporary, permanent. Every major aspect of the children's lives, their education, residence, healthcare, and future public identity, would now fall under direct royal oversight. But that wasn't even the most explosive clause. Buried deep in the document was something called Clause 14C, media exploitation and identity licensing, and it changed the game completely. The clause forbade either parent from using the children's names, images, voices, or likenesses in any commercial media anywhere in the world without royal approval. Books, documentaries, streaming shows, merchandise, even AI-generated images. Everything was banned unless the palace signed off. The reason? Royal advisors feared the children were at risk of becoming intellectual property. But Meghan refused to sign the clause. Her team argued that she had future creative projects planned involving Lilibet's likeness, including a proposed children's book series. That refusal triggered a legal alarm, because under royal family law, custodial neutrality required ensured that neither parent profit from the children's identity. To palace lawyers, Meghan's position looked like a direct violation, and suddenly the negotiations turned brutal. Meanwhile, another devastating revelation surfaced, something hidden inside the couple's 2018 prenuptial agreement. A clause so shocking that legal experts later called it one of the most aggressive narrative control contracts ever written. Clause 7. According to the document, Meghan held sole intellectual property rights over Harry's likeness, voice, memoir material, and the entire narrative of their shared life after 2016. That meant Harry couldn't legally speak about his own experiences without her permission. Not interviews, not documentaries, not books, nothing. He had signed away the story of his own life. Royal insiders were stunned. Princess Anne reportedly slammed the document on the table and declared that it looked less like a marriage and more like a licensing agreement. Prince William was said to be furious because, from the palace's perspective, Harry had effectively surrendered control of his identity, and the crown had just discovered it far too late. The monarchy had chosen survival. That's when he made the accusation that shocked everyone and pointed directly at Meghan. The storm that had been building inside palace walls finally exploded on the evening of February 19th. Until that moment, the public believed the custody agreement was simply a brutal legal settlement. But when a confidential palace dossier leaked to select British media outlets, the narrative instantly shifted from scandal to something far more disturbing. Because buried deep inside that dossier was a section with an icy bureaucratic title that sounded harmless but carried consequences that would rewrite royal history. Contingent Custodial Jurisdiction. And underneath it were two names: Archie Harrison, Lilibet Diana. The revelation stunned royal observers. The document indicated that during the legal review preceding the custody agreement, investigators had discovered irregularities in documentation tied to the children's official royal registration, birth records, travel authorizations, biometric verification logs. According to the report, there were gaps, missing entries, administrative inconsistencies that had apparently triggered a quiet internal investigation months earlier. For centuries, the Windsor family tree had been one of the most carefully documented genealogical records in the world. Every birth, every lineage, every successor had been meticulously recorded. And now, suddenly, two names were under review. Inside the palace, panic mixed with anger because the implications were enormous. If the monarchy could not verify the documentation surrounding the children's official registration, the legal consequences were catastrophic. Titles, succession rights, and royal protections were all tied directly to those records. And so the institution did what it has always done when confronted with a threat. It moved to protect itself. Within hours of the dossier circulating, the Office of the Lord Chamberlain issued an addendum to the earlier deroyalization order. The language was so cold and precise that many commentators later described it as chilling. Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana would no longer be associated with any privileges, protections, or ceremonial recognition of the British crown. There would be no appeals, no reconsideration, no future review. It was final. For Meghan Markle, the announcement was devastating because for years the Sussex brand had been built on a powerful narrative. Two royal children growing up between worlds, a bridge between the ancient monarchy and a modern global identity. That narrative was now legally destroyed. The foundation of the brand had vanished overnight, and the world reacted instantly. Social media exploded. Late-night television turned the story into spectacle. Royal commentators debated whether the palace had crossed an unforgivable line, but inside Montecito, the situation was spiraling into crisis. Emergency meetings were reportedly held with multiple American law firms, crisis management consultants, and former media partners. Every possible legal strategy was being explored. None of them looked promising, because while the Sussex operation struggled to stabilize itself, the monarchy had already moved to seal the final chapter. On February 20th, something almost surreal happened. Princess Catherine appeared at a pediatric community center in West London for what seemed like an ordinary charity visit, but royal watchers quickly noticed something unusual. Pinned to her coat was a brooch no one had ever seen before, a small rose gold shield. The following morning, palace sources confirmed what it represented. The brooch commemorated Windsor Protection Protocol 12, the constitutional clause used to revoke the children's royal recognition. It was a symbol, and when that collision finally happened, the institution moved with the kind of precision it had perfected over centuries. Protocols were activated, clauses were enforced, records were updated, and the gate quietly closed. The monarchy moved forward, just as it always has, leaving behind a controversy that may be debated for decades, and a question that still divides royal watchers around the world. Was this a ruthless act of institutional survival, or the final proof that love and modern celebrity were never going to survive inside the unforgiving architecture of the British crown?